Hello and welcome. So this is my first live stream. If there's anybody out there, hope you enjoy. Quick background on me. My name's Joe. I'm a solutions architect. Been a solutions architect for about 25 years. Basically a solutions consultant, software consultant in the enterprise world for nearly 30 years. And what I am doing is basically doing some public coding with the use of the latest and greatest AI tools. Today I'm going to be working on my SaaS app that I started building a little while back, mainly to solve a problem I have at home, and that is basically managing expenses between multiple people in the household, and who owes what for what shares. So I decided to build a SaaS app and utilize some of the tools, specifically Codex and Claude, as a way of building out this app rapidly, and also giving me an opportunity to learn more about the capabilities of these tools. And the crazy thing is that these tools are literally changing and being updated on a weekly basis. In fact, this week they released new versions of both the OpenAI Codex as well as the Claude by Anthropic with new features and functions. If you have questions, drop them in the chat. I will try to answer them for you. And then otherwise, I am going to get into doing some coding. So the first thing I'm going to do is, if you're seeing my screen, you can see, let's get to that actually. Okay, so now you should be able to see my main development screen. Middle here is a basically terminal. We're going to get logged into Claude there. Claude is basically functional from a CLI perspective. CLI simply stands for Command Line Interface. Again, feel free to ask whatever questions you would like. I am a software consultant, not a software engineer. So the main difference there is that I am very open to questions. Questions in the sense that I don't believe there are any stupid questions, especially when it comes to technology. So if you got a question, drop it. I'll try to answer it for you. Okay, and I'll try to explain things as I'm going along, just so you have a sense of what is happening here. So the middle section here is a command line interface, which I'm going to connect to Claude here in just a few minutes. And then I'm going to get started with OpenAI's Codex, which is located over here on the right-hand side. Okay, and if anybody is watching this through the live stream on Shorts, I am streaming both desktop version and the vertical version on Shorts. So if you want to head over to the desktop version, you'll be able to get a much better view of some of the details here. So I'm going to get Claude started, and I'm going to use something called the YOLO mode. YOLO standing for you only live once. Basically, it's allowing full permissions to Claude to make changes to the files on my system. Some would say it's not recommended, others would say it's recommended. If you've used any of these tools, you quickly find out that they make a lot of changes to your files, and it gets quite annoying when every time they want to make a change, they ask you, and then you have to interact with it. And so you find yourself interacting. If you don't give full permissions, you find yourself interacting literally hundreds of times. Hello, Aurelio. Thanks for stopping by. Okay, so we've gotten ourselves logged into and gotten Claude up and running. The Codex is up and running by default. Now, they did implement a new feature this week that I wanted to test out, and that is something called review. So let's see if we can get Codex to do a full review of my code. And by the way, if you're not familiar with interacting with AI models, specifically the AI models that have been set up with chat interfaces, you talk to them like you talk to a human being. And if you're a technical person like myself, the more technical you talk to them, the better off you'll be in terms of getting more detailed answers back and a better understanding of what they are capable of. The key thing is that when it comes to these AI models, you kind of have to do a humanity check. A humanity check is simply asking yourself, have I given enough information to the model that if I was giving information to a human being, would they indeed understand what I'm asking for, right? Welcome, Burn. You say you can't see anything. Are you on desktop or are you on the shorts? Both should be streaming. Now, at the moment, Codex is doing a review of the entire code base for this particular SaaS application. And sometimes this is like watching paint dry, right? So AI is fast when you compare it to how long it would take a human being to do this type of work, but it is not immediate or instant. It does take some time. So if you're on the desktop or widescreen, you should be able to see my entire VS Code interface here. And the main areas again are the middle section here, which is the Claude code. And then the right-hand side here is Codex by OpenAI. Okay, so if you're on desktop, can you not see my main desktop? That should be streamed. Let me see if I can check it on YouTube. And let me double check my audio too. Okay, I just checked the desktop. It is streaming. Should be able to see this entire interface of VS Code. Okay, so what's happening right now is Codex is continuing to go through all of my code. And again, this is a new feature that OpenAI came out with. They basically have developed or customized GPT-5, which was a release a couple weeks ago, to be a very specific code model. And they have now integrated Codex with their GPT-5 version, and it's either their thinking version, which is a version that takes a significant amount of time to process, or it is their medium thinking version. So basically what we just did here with OpenAI's Codex is we asked for a full review on the application that we have. And again, this is basically a SaaS application, web-based. It is built in a combination of Next.js and React. And this is the final result of the review that we have on screen here. So this is so if you're on desktop, you should be able to see this. It's a bit hard to see in terms of the, on the short there. So let me just take a look at this and see what it has to say. So it says there's a bug. Looks like the script suggests something, but just HTML coverage lands under following the printed command for Rofini, so it looks like it had found a couple of bugs, or believes it has found a couple of bugs. And then also has a suggestion. And that suggestion seems to be a platform issue. So here's the key thing, guys. You'll find that there's a lot of people out there trying to sell you various platforms, right? Whether it is Lovable or some of the other platforms out there, and trying to convince you that with a few keystrokes and a few minor descriptions of what you're looking for in terms of building out an app, that is possible. Again, I've been doing this for nearly 30 years, and I can tell you that with my interaction and use of AI over the last 18 months, that is not accurate. You can build out something that's like an MVP, which is a minimal viable product that you could use to potentially demo for the purposes of trying to get some funding or something on that nature. But in terms of actually building out a full stack application, you have to have an understanding of what it is that you're trying to do. And that requires some technical skills. But the insane part here is that the AI models that have come out, and specifically Claude and Codex, are really insane in the sense that they give you, in essence, a software engineering team that you get to work alongside and have them do the work for you. But you still have to understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish, and also asking very specific details. So this is a really good example in that we have the review that's done. It's a couple different bugs, and now it's up to me to decide whether I'd want those bugs fixed or addressed, or if the suggestion makes sense, right? We can have Claude do a similar review. So we'll have Claude do a security review. No. Okay, so basically what I asked Claude to do is to do a very similar kind of full code review, and also told it not to make any changes at this point in time, which is important because I've got it running in YOLO mode, right, where it's got full permission. So if I don't tell it not to make any changes, it would go off and begin to make some changes. So Claude's now walking its way through the entire code base, trying to determine if there are changes that need to be made. And it's always kind of interesting to run two different AI models like this, because you get a chance to see if they are in sync in terms of problems they find or suggestions they have, which can be very beneficial. I will say that Claude, a couple weeks ago when I was doing this and I was making some changes to the app, was stuck, could not resolve a problem, and went round and round and round trying to fix the problem. I then launched Codex through OpenAI, which this is about 2 or 3 weeks ago, when they started to introduce the IDE version of Codex, which basically is a simple plug-in to VS Code. You can also run it by CLI, and you can also run it in the cloud. And so I decided to run it in the cloud, gave it access to the code base from GitHub, and asked it to review the code and try to determine how we could resolve the issue that we were having. And it was actually I believe, a database issue that we were having at the time. And strangely enough, or maybe not so strangely enough, Codex from OpenAI, it figured out what the problem was, recommended a solution, and went ahead and coded that. And that was very nice. And when and so this was done in the cloud, and with OpenAI and Codex in the cloud, you basically are connecting the cloud environment to GitHub. And then it is creating a pull request where it creates a branch, a copy of an existing branch, reviews that branch, makes changes to it, and then and when you're ready, you can merge that pull request back into your development branch. So I went and I did all this, and when I pulled that development branch back down to my desktop in VS Code and had Codex look at it, had Claude look at it, Claude it was kind of funny. Its reaction was basically, "Oh, you fixed the problem that I was trying to fix," and it was quite interesting to see kind of its reaction to another AI's fix on the code that we had. So, okay, let's see here. So for Claude, it looks like it has finished. Okay. And so basically down below here, it is saying that immediate action is recommended. It says remove environmental.local from the repository and add it to git ignore, which is interesting because that should have already been done. Rotate all exposed credentials immediately, and then add node underscore NV production check to ET bypass implement rate limiting and strengthen input validation for classifications. Now this is interesting because that should have already been done. So let's take a look at the git and ignore. Again, for those who may or may not be familiar with it, and again, my background is as a consultant, not as an engineer. So I am a big believer in sharing the knowledge as I go along. So git ignore is basically a simple file. It's a property file in essence. It tells the Git process of pushing to not push certain files up to GitHub. And for a lot of people who don't realize, when you're working with GitHub and you are creating repositories and pushing repositories and projects up there, unless you explicitly tell GitHub not to make it public, all those files you push up there are public and anybody can view them. There is a way of changing that, but there is no way to change it consistently unless you have something like an enterprise type of an account. So you can use git ignore to identify your local files that you do not want pushed up to GitHub. And the most common files you want to ignore in this process are things like your environmental settings. And your environmental settings are typically stored in an environmental file, env.local or env.production. It just depends on your naming conventions. And what is contained in those files, which of course I'm not going to show you, but what's contained in those files are things like your secret keys to your database connections and any other types of other services you are interacting with. So those secrets are stored in those files. So you do not want to upload those files to GitHub, because then what ends up happening is you expose your secret key. And if that secret key is related to a service, let's call it OpenAI's API, okay, in which you are charged for each token going in and each token going out, well, you've now just exposed your token or your secret key. Somebody's going to come along, find it, grab it, and start using it until you figure out that you have a very large bill being generated from your API usage. Okay, so it's very important to understand some of the really basics but very important things as related to just kind of application development, SaaS development, etc. Right, and this is one of the key things I've seen so many times in terms of people making videos about it or making posts about it, and how many secret keys and how many passwords, usernames and passwords are exposed on GitHub because people don't really understand this concept. Excuse me. So I'm looking at my GitHub, my git ignore file here, and actually So it's talking about .nv.local from the repository to add it to git ignore, right? And as we can clearly see here, okay, it already is. So this is where, it's important to understand the AI models, are not fallible, right? They do make mistakes. And this is where you can even play these two against each other, and you can say, okay, you're telling me one thing. Now we could go check it in Codex if we wanted to and see what it has to say, right? And maybe we'll do that, and just so you can kind of see how you can utilize these two. Now, just for context, OpenAI's Codex, as it stands right now, for about $20 a month, which is your subscription fee to OpenAI, you would have the same access that I do in terms of working with Codex, which is really quite insane in terms of the price and what you get for it. You do have upper limits, threshold limits, usage limits that you will hit, but there are some solutions to that, which are mainly going to work in the cloud instead of working on your desktop, and you can get around some of those things in terms of the usage limits until they reset, and then you can come back and start working on your desktop again. But so let's see here. On a curiosity, I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to ask Codex, can you check these recommendations and determine if they are really required or if they have already been implemented. So now Codex is going through, doing its thing, and I have this currently set to allowing Codex to have full access to the system, just like I do with Claude, and the thinking level for Codex right now is set to medium. So this is not even high. If I were to set this to high, this process would take longer, but it would also be more thorough and accurate in terms of its response. OpenAI recommends pretty much using medium unless you know that you are asking for a solution or a review or something in which you know that the additional thought process would be required. Okay, so Codex has finished its analysis. Okay, so this is what I had asked. Again, you speak to it like you're speaking to a human. Okay, it's the easiest way to do. And so what does it say? Next steps, decide whether to. So it says assessment, remove blah, blah, blah from repository and add to ignore. So see, according to this, it's already handled, right? You can see that here. Now, one of the kind of cool things about these AI models, specifically the coding models, is what I'm really referring to here, is that if you have some technical background, okay, if you have some experience in doing some design work, development work, configuration work at any level, okay, the great thing is that these AI models, as kind of teachers and teachers that will do things for you, they never get tired, right? So if you need more information or more context about what it's trying to do or what it's recommending to do, or you want to just simply better understand a concept, you simply ask it, and it will be more than happy to provide you a clear understanding or context of whatever the issue is that it thinks exists in the code and how to approach it. It's very again, I've been doing this for 30 years, and this blows my mind. It's quite crazy. Okay, so as you can see here again, already handled, right? So that's great. Is ignored and blah, blah, blah. Just make sure any past commits with secrets are purged if they existed, which I've already done, but I will double check that again. And then, of course, it's talking about the rotate all exposed credentials immediately. I don't see committed secrets in the current tree, so there's no evidence a rotation has happened or is needed right now. Okay. So this add node underscore DMD production check to ETE bypass. So ETE is actually a testing modules that are available, very useful. So one of the great things about the AI models that I have been able to really kind of get a much better understanding and handle on is the automated testing that you can implement into your applications you build. And this doesn't make a difference whether it is a SaaS app, which is a completely web-based app, or whether it's a mobile type of SaaS app. There are many different types of tools that are out there that are basically modules or libraries that are available depending on what platform you're building in, that if properly implemented can certainly streamline and ease your testing process. And testing is critical, okay? It doesn't make a difference whether AI is doing the coding or you're doing all the coding. You have to test. There's just no way around it. And this is where a lot of those simple platforms or those platforms claiming to be able to get you a working application with just a few lines of text asking for something, I think falls short, because I don't believe testing is a concept that really is part of their whole kind of sales or marketing spiel. So anyways, so basically the bottom line here is with Codex reviewing the same thing that Claude reviewed, it is telling us that nothing is really needed. Okay. Okay. So if you want a sneak peek, let's see what we've got going on here. If you want a sneak peek in terms of the application, let me bring that up so you can kind of see what I've got going on. So I'm going to bring up another terminal. npm run dev. This is going to basically launch a development web server, and it's going to provide me the ability to run my application locally so that I can interact with it. So I'll give you a little sneak peek at what the end result is here. Let's jump over to the other screen. Okay. And on shorts, I don't have it on shorts, so I'm sorry about that. Okay. So on desktop, you can see the application. So I'm going to log into it. We're going to log into it using a Google account of mine. So the idea behind this, actually, let me log in with a different one. So here's the key, one of the key things I should point out to you. All this authentication, okay, this is all happening through something called OAuth, or I think technically it's zero auth. It's basically a service that Okta provides. So in today's world, when you're building applications, right, you are not building all the underlying supporting components that you need. In other words, the authentication piece, you don't need to build that, right? The database, of course, you don't need to go stand up a separate database. There are plenty of services now that are available that you can integrate very easily with, that will allow you to get up and running very quickly for your authentication pieces, for your database pieces, for any middleware pieces, for persistent storage, okay? So the coding tools are Claude and Codex. So depending on the platform that you're seeing me on right now, whether it's Shorts or whether it is desktop, you can see different views. So Claude by Anthropic, as well as Codex by OpenAI, is what I'm using for the AI coding. Thanks for the question. So this is the app. So basically what happened was my husband and I, we split expenses on a regular basis, and most of the expenses I run through my credit card because we like points on United Miles, right? That type of thing. So I had a need. So because of that need, and because of the aggravation of trying to pull together spreadsheets every so often, I decided to build out a app for it, right? And I started building it out using OpenAI, using GPT-5 on their web-based platform, and it ended up giving me what they call a scaffolding, which is basically a structure of the application to start working with. And I now know that I would never do that again directly, that I would spend a great deal more time in developing the overall requirements. And then as I developed the requirements and refined the requirements, I'd get those kind of all locked down as best as I could before I would have an AI model start to build the application for me. I would have saved myself definitely a pretty significant amount of aggravation, okay? So this is the application. Codex has become my daily driver, works so well for me. Yep, Matt, I absolutely agree. Did you know that what's behind Copilot for GitHub is actually OpenAI? And Microsoft's Copilot that they have on every Windows desktop these days, right? What's behind it? OpenAI. So, and in most cases, if you ever wonder what AI model is actually being used behind any of these kind of third parties that are offering these various services and what basically wrappers, if you will, you just ask. You say, hey, what model are you? And more often than not, it'll come back and it'll tell you exactly the model that's being used. They're very honest. So anyways, this is the application. The whole point of this application is to be able to take expenses in both from bank accounts as well as credit card companies. No direct connection. Basically, you can upload files here. So for here, you can upload your files, and once you get your files uploaded, you can then go through a review process where you review the transactions, and then you can categorize them. And then eventually you can do some reporting on them so that you understand who owes what. And as I was building this out, as I mentioned before, for some people who were around earlier, my background is 30 years of enterprise software. All of those years I've been a software consultant, and 25 of those years basically been a solutions architect for enterprise software. And a lot of the software I've worked with for many years has been multi-tenant. And I won't go into the concept right now, but building my own SaaS was an eye-opener in terms of what a true multi-tenant SaaS product is. There's a lot of nuances to it, but it was really quite interesting. And if you are in the technical realm and you're concerned about being replaced in terms of by AI in any aspect whatsoever, I strongly recommend learning as much as you can about it, and make yourself stand out at work as much as you can as well. And I've done that in a variety of different ways. But the more you know, I think the more you'll realize that even if you end up laid off, there's an opportunity for those who are technical to some extent, that they're going to have a asynchronous advantage that has never been available to technical people before. I mean, it's just, again, these coding models are really quite insane. So anyways, that's a sneak peek behind the scenes in terms of what the application that I'm actually working on. I will share more of it as I go along and more as I continue to program publicly. But if you have any questions, feel free to drop them. Happy to try to answer them for you. I plan to do this for about an hour, and I think I'm coming up on it. My just to kind of give you a heads up, my really next piece here is going to be around kind of fine tuning my testing. I've got a variety of different testing modules, and libraries that I have implemented through AI that allow me to test the underlying connections, the calculations that are going on, the uploading of files, the parsing of those files, all these things in an automated process, which again, as I mentioned before, if you're interested in building anything like this in the future, you need to kind of start thinking as you're thinking through your features and functions about how you're going to test it. And you don't have to necessarily test apps today via human interaction, right? Because it's a very repetitive process. It becomes tiresome and cumbersome. There's plenty of automated tools out there these days to take advantage of. And with AI like Codex or Claude, they will build out these test cases for you like you would not believe, very quickly, very easily, and then you can iterate upon them. So it's quite good. Let me check something. So with this particular app, since I've decided to eventually market it, which honestly, when I first started building this, that was not anything that was in my mind. But as I started developing this more and more, what I can say is that often, if you can think of a problem you have in your own life and you think of a way of solving that problem, chances are other people out there have a similar problem, right? Or have the same problem. So if you develop a solution, whether it's a SaaS or a mobile app or anything of this nature that is solving that problem, you certainly should consider then taking that to market. And in today's world, again, with the AI models, being able to take it to market as a solopreneur, okay, as an individual, single individual, is more likely and more available to you than it ever has been in the history of any kind of technology that we have been living in. I mean, it's really quite insane. So highly recommend, thinking about things and trying this for yourself. So eventually, once I get everything worked out and test it for a while in my home, because I have a real need for it for myself, I'll probably take it to market and market it and see what happens. And the thing is you don't have to have a home run, right? If you have a couple hundred users on one of your applications, it can bring in a nice monthly income, right? And then you move on to the next solution and you just do it over and over again. So that is where I am at in terms of what I'm doing. And this primarily all comes from the fact that I've been in the technical world for 30 years. I'm seeing what's coming in terms of AI. I got heavily involved in it in about 18 months ago. And I am not looking back because I think this is an opportunity that we definitely should not squander. So it looks like Gupta, why not cursor? So that's a really good question. And then let's see. Then, so let me try to answer your first question. So why not Cursor? So here's a very interesting story I ran across. Okay, I actually was using Cursor for a while, and I also used GitHub's Copilot, which I mentioned earlier, is actually based on OpenAI's models. I used that to do some work actually within my enterprise life, and it worked. But this was fairly early on in terms of the development of these models and stuff, and it worked in it. But it was not a whole lot more than, I would say, it was better than code completion, where that's been around forever. But it was nothing like the models are today. But it helped greatly, right? So then I started trying Cursor because I heard all the buzz about it, because it could do more than GitHub Copilot just being used within the VS Code. So I started using it. But to be honest, it wasn't that much better. And here's the thing that I found out just recently, which I was not aware of. Cursor is a fork of VS Code. And because it is a fork of VS Code, your plugins can't come from the Microsoft store. They don't come from the official Microsoft repository. And if you're familiar with VS Code, you know that it's actually a Microsoft product. And so I was like, okay, so what's the big deal? Well, as I watched a particular YouTube video, actually it was by a pretty smart guy, what turned out was that a developer had lost about $500,000 in Bitcoin because he was using, it was either, I don't know if it was Cursor, but it was another forked version of VS Code. He had downloaded a plugin like we all do, because this is part of what you do within VS Code in terms of extending various features and functions. Problem was, it came from a non-reputable source. And because forks can't use the official Microsoft repository, they have to rely on a third-party repository, in which case you have to rely that third-party repository is actually implementing the same security level scans and vetting of the various vendors there, right? And unfortunately, they weren't. And this guy downloaded a plugin that ended up searching his machine for apparently crypto keys, found them, was able to get it to his coins, and he ended up losing a significant amount of money. He didn't do anything wrong, right? And who knew? I didn't know, to be perfectly honest. So to my point, or to your question, why not Cursor? That's enough reason for me to stay away from forks, period. And for anybody who's new and trying to understand what I'm saying, a fork is basically, you take a base piece of software and you create a slightly different version of that software. And if a piece of software is what they refer to as open source, okay, and open source simply means that it is not it's not considered proprietary in the sense that Microsoft owns it and only Microsoft can make a change to it, right? So VS Code is a Microsoft product, but it's an open source product. So therefore, other vendors can say, okay, we're going to take that base code of VS Code and we're going to build on top of it something unique, like Cursor did. That becomes a fork, okay, kind of like a fork in the road. And therefore, you end up with a slightly different version with different features, which can be a great thing. But unfortunately, in this particular case, it put the general users at a greater risk, especially when it comes to the plugins. So interesting story. So that's one of the reasons that I steer away from it. The other question you had was, would you say having open source SaaS would give a better ROI of your time than your own app? Open source would give you a better ROI of your own time than your own app. I'm not sure if I understand the question completely. So here's how I think about it. Mobile apps, right? Nobody's going to put in a mobile app on their phone, as an example, unless you go through the stores, right? Whether it's Apple or whether it's the Apple Store or whether it's the Android store, right? And of course, and if you do that, right, they're taking 30%, 35%, something like that, right off the top of every sale that you make. On a web app, right, a SaaS, true SaaS-based web app, you get to keep 100% of that revenue, right? There's nobody taking that. Now, of course, you got to get the word out there, so you're going to have marketing costs in terms of promoting it. But even with a mobile app, you're still going to have marketing costs in order to get the word out. There's a very few apps that are going to go, whether they go viral or even, go to a large enough audience to be what am I trying to say? To be popular enough to download, right? Or popular enough to log in. So you're going to have marketing costs anyways. As far as like open sourcing, creating something that's open source and letting others build on top of it, if that's what you're kind of referring to, because that's kind of what Cursor hit, or that's kind of what Microsoft did with VS Code. I honestly am not sure what the revenue model is there, so I couldn't really speak to it. Any major differences between Claude Code Pro or Max models for not so complex applications? So I will tell you this: I hate working on something, right, and then being stopped because of a rate limitation. I also hate having to worry about how much I'm spending or how many tokens am I sending in and how many tokens I'm getting back. So for Claude Code, I just did the max so that I didn't have to worry about any of the aggravation. Now, even with the max account, you still have some kind of limits, right? And when I hit that limit, it'll push me to using the different model, right? There's two different models with under Anthropic. There's Claude, and then there is the other one that I forget the name on. Anyways, it will push me back to that one when I hit a certain rate limit. OpenAI, honestly, you can't beat it. The Codex OpenAI, I mean, for $20 a month, you're getting a crazy amount of usage, at least from my experience. And I'm not paying anything more. I'm not using their API. I just have my $20 a month OpenAI account. And then I made a short little video. I think I made a short on this related to what happens when you hit your limit related to Codex, using it within VS Code or by CLI. Well, you can go and you can run it in the cloud, and the usage limits in the cloud are different than the usage limits for either running it CLI or running it within the plugin for VS Code. So when I do occasionally run into a rate limit with Codex, then I just jump to the cloud. And again, not sure if you were here earlier, but connect it up to GitHub. It'll have access to all your code. You can do pulls and pushes and PRs and merges and everything you need to do, all within that cloud environment as well as the GitHub environment. And so you can continue to move on with your design and development. And you can obviously with GitHub, you can pull all your updated code back down and continue working on it in VS Code. So right now I'm using them both. And again, on screen here at the moment, we have a scenario in which Claude was saying one thing. I put it into Codex. It was saying something different, right? So I kind of like having them both to be able to do a sanity check, right? I have technical background. I have technical skills, right? But it's nice to sometimes have a second opinion, if you will, right? And so, I see a lot of benefits and strength in terms of having the ability to work for both. Now, that may not be something that everybody can afford, but I think it's definitely something we may see in the future. More and more people working with both simultaneously to kind of get a consensus on what the best practice is for code changes or modifications or bugs or whatever it might be. So let's see. So Gupta, it says, what are the skills you think we should focus on with all these tools nowadays? Context. I'm an entry-level AI engineer. So that's a great question, and that's a great place for you to be. Here's my thoughts, and again, been doing this for a long, long time. I think the most powerful soft skill people can develop today is the power of description. Now, that might sound kind of funny. It might sound kind of esoteric, if you will. But what I mean by this is that the biggest challenge people are going to have with AI is being able to describe in painful detail, right, what it is that they're trying to accomplish. And whether that is trying to design an application or build an application or create an image or create a video, any of these things, right? The power of description. In fact, I think probably one of the most beneficial things they could start doing in school is to have students reverse engineer things like photographs or videos or even code or applications. And what I mean by that is we're going to grade you on how well you can describe, right, this image, this video, this program, whatever it might be. How well can you describe it to the person who has not seen it? And will they walk away from that description or from that conversation and then go and see that image, video, or application and go, yep, that's exactly what I had in my mind, right? That's exactly what you described. Or was it off? Because that's going to be the key, right? The key is going to be able to be so crystal clear on your descriptions in terms of anything that you want an AI generative model to create to be able to achieve. So I think that's the number one soft skill. The other soft skill from my perspective is just communication. Communication, and if you're in the world of software consultants, solutions architects, any of this type of thing, understand that technical skills are great, but personal skills such as soft skills, as far as communication, as far as taking that extra step, if you will, in terms of your job, can be really beneficial. And what I mean by the extra step in terms of your job, I'll give you a really simple example. Obviously, I'm sitting here on YouTube, so I'm not terribly shy in terms of being in front of the camera. About 8 months ago, I decided to start doing some of this for my job, okay? LinkedIn, to me as an example, but also doing some of this stuff internally with my company when I had to do various presentations and stuff. And I thought to myself, why not try to utilize all the skills that I have, both kind of in my 9 to 5 as well as outside of my 9 to 5, and pull those all together and help myself kind of stand out from the pack, right? So soft skills, creative skills, I think are hugely beneficial. And there's no reason why you can't bring them into a lot of different jobs. Let's see. Yeah, so as far as the plans go, as I mentioned before, you cannot beat OpenAI's $20 and you get access to Codex. You just can't. So if anybody wants to get started with doing anything that I'm doing here related to coding with AI, okay, in VS Code, go get yourself a $20 a month membership or subscription to OpenAI, okay? Download VS Code, which is free, and then you download the plugin from OpenAI, and you log in with your account, and you are ready to go, okay? And it's really, really that simple in terms of getting started. And again, you get a lot of usage for $20 a month. Let's see. So I talked about the skills. Sorry I joined late. I see you're using Playwright for your tests. Good eye. How good is it with writing UI and API tests for existing code? So it's actually pretty good. But so it is actually very good. And this is, I was talking about this earlier too. So a lot of what I have done in my technical career has been implementation of enterprise software, right? So again, I the first to admit I'm not a software engineer. I am a solutions developer, solutions consultant, solutions architect, and basically those are all fancy words to implementing enterprise level software. Okay, for large companies, large organizations, federal government, state governments, the list goes on and on and on. People who work in my role, typically we have to be what we call jacks of all trades and masters of none. Okay. And have I done a lot of coding over the last 30 years? Absolutely. Everything from some COBOL garbage to lots of shell scripting to Java to Perl, and the list goes on and on and on. JavaScript, and I mean, it just goes on and on and on. So I've got a lot of background, right? What's a great thing about what's great about today's world with these AI models and how they're developing is I know what I need to ask for, right? But I don't necessarily know how to get there as a straight line, right? And typically we'd go online and we would start searching for the various blogs and things that are out there talking about how to set up these tools and everything else. Well, now you just have a conversation, right? And the tools themselves. In fact, I had Codex do most of the initial implementation for all the testing libraries that it was recommending. And so I've been using those. I am really at the start of kind of, I would say, fully exercising those tools. Playwright, for as an example, because because I'm doing a web-based application, there's a lot of interactions, right? I like it because I can run it in two different modes, right? First is all kind of behind the scenes. I don't see anything in terms of what's going on as far as the interactions. But then I can also run it in a interactive mode where I actually get to see it interacting with the screens, and it gives me a better sense that it's doing what I am expecting it to do, what I need it to do, right, in order to test various features and functions. But it's quite excellent, right? I think it's great. What I like to do, and again, can't stress this enough, when you're dealing with these models, think of it like dealing with, think of it like dealing with a PhD level software engineer. But if you've ever worked with engineers, and if you're an engineer yourself, I apologize. But in my 30 years of working with many software engineers, there's only a handful that I've ever encountered that are what I would say open-minded in the sense of having genuine conversations with people who are not at their level. Okay, they often come with a lot of attitude and a lot of every question you ask is a stupid question, whereas a consultant, okay, I believe every question you ask is not a stupid question. In fact, I believe there are no stupid questions. Okay, so that's kind of where I come from. So I think Playwright is great. I think these testing tools are fantastic. And everything I've done with them thus far, I've had either Claude or Codex set up for me. And then I've also had it, and this is the key thing, is I know there's configuration files behind this stuff, right? Because this is the world I've lived in for so long. So, okay, show me the configuration files, and it'll show me the configuration files. Okay, how can I change XYZ? This is how we can change XYZ. Do you want? Then it usually comes back and says, hey, you want me to make that change for you? And then in that particular case, I'm like, okay, fine, So apparently, Gupta, you've experienced the same software engineers I have. So yeah, it's kind of funny. But anyways, any other questions, comments? So you can use a lot of the same ones, right? Most of this, in most cases, with the mobile apps, right? Depending on the whether it's the language or the platform you're coding in, right? And that's going to be one of the next things I dive deeper into in terms of for my own purposes, right? So let me back up just for a moment and just say this is that one of the videos I have out there, one of my most recent videos, was basically what role are you going to play, or what role do you see yourself playing in the age of AI, right? And for me, that is what I have called AI product creator, right? And that whole video was a combination of me having a conversation with AI, specifically some of the open AI models, and kind of refining what I had in my mind into a script, and having it also help me kind of define more clearly what I kind of had in my mind in terms of what I've seen in terms of like 6 distinct different kinds of roles when it comes to AI over the last 18 months. And so what I have determined, at least for myself, is to focus on being an AI product creator. And what that means is not necessarily creating AI, right? But creating products utilizing AI, right? So whether it's mobile apps or whether it's SaaS apps that are web-based, or a combination thereof, the tools have given us, and when I say us, I mean those who have some technical background, an amazing opportunity, and an opportunity that has never come along in our technical lifetimes before. So as far as the testing goes, I'm working, I'm doing the UI stuff in Flutterflow, because I think it's going to be the best to work with. And I don't know what will all translate there in terms of the testing tools, but I will certainly keep you updated as I dive into doing some mobile app stuff once I get through my web-based SaaS, and once I then have it kind of launched just locally here at home to solve my own problems, and then eventually I will launch it publicly, and try to market it. And like I said, if I end up with a couple hundred monthly users of it, I'd be perfectly happy. When I say writing code, yeah. So here's the thing. Here's the interesting thing about code writing. And actually, I pay really close attention to a lot of the OpenAI folks in terms of the interviews they do, and the kind of coffee chats that they have. Excuse me. And one of the things that they talked about, some of the senior engineers there, is that they've heard people say they should tell their children not to get coding degrees, not to go coding, right? But their perspective was, no, that's the wrong advice. You really should know how to code, because if you know how to code, then you know what to ask for. And if you know what to ask for, then you can get much more done with the AI models supporting you to get there, right? I think if you're looking at so coding, I think for me, let me take a step back here for a moment. The best benefit from coding is how to think logically, and most importantly, how to break down a problem into its components. And this is probably one of the biggest things that I think people miss in terms of trying to start things like AI agencies, or trying to become business consultants out in the world, who have no experience understanding that the most valuable thing you can bring to a business is to be able to analyze a problem, break it down into its components, and then define a solution to that problem. And then, of course, implement the solution. That's key, right? And a logical brain, which is what's required kind of for coding, that helps get you there far better than anything else. But as far as companies would expect more stuff in mathematics, I think it depends on who you're working for. Like in OpenAI, I think in OpenAI, you're that's an area that's really deep in terms of data science, right? Scientist, right? More so than coders. I've heard some really interesting discussions from the people who work there, excuse me, online, who admit to having little to no technical background, right? And then others who, they've got multiple PhDs and in all sorts of data science aspects, right? And I think that's great, but that's not honestly my field, right? And that's where I go back to kind of the 6 different AI roles. One of those AI roles certainly is those who are building the models, right? Those who are fine-tuning the models, right? And that if that's something you want to do, I'd say go for it, because that's only going to explode in terms of opportunities, right? But that's not my area of expertise. My area of expertise and what I'm focusing on is the AI product creation, right? Utilizing AI to my benefit to be able to create something that I then in turn can basically market and sell, right? And I'm not I've done consulting on the side before myself. Used to have a digital marketing agency that I did on the side for several years, right? But again, I've worked in enterprise software for so long. I work with clients all day long. The last thing I want to do in my off time is to work with more clients. So for me, AI product creation through utilizing the power of the AI tools that are out there now is my go-to in terms of trying to build something on the side in addition to still being full-time employed, and I am grateful for that. So Gupta, so learn to code but not spend time in it. I would say my recommendation in terms of coding and your particular kind of questions you're asking, I would learn to code, okay? I would learn as much as you can in terms of mathematics as well. And just embrace the whole aspects of how generative models and stuff are created as much as you can. And again, that's not my area of expertise, right? But I can guarantee you any of those things are going to benefit you significantly, right? Data science is seemingly one of the biggest areas as related to AI these days. Blackstone, you mentioned that you've used all of these models. In your opinion, which one is easier to interact with, especially when asking to perform tasks that involve referencing specific files? So if you're talking about coding, okay, right now, so if you're talking about coding specifically, Claude, I started using it, loved it, okay? Then, of course, things changed so rapidly. GPT-5 came out, Codex came out, and the Codex plugin came out, and I said, well, let me give it a try. And excuse me. And as I mentioned a little while back, I ran into a problem with Claude. The problem was it couldn't solve a problem for me, and it was actually a database connection issue that I was running into. And so at that point in time, I decided, let me give Codex a try. And I actually utilized it in the cloud, which you can do, right? There's different aspects of accessing or different ways of accessing Codex. And so I used it in the cloud, and it solved the problem. It solved the problem for me in a very short amount of time. And Claude was kind of surprised, weirdly enough, that the problem was solved and how it was solved. So it was at that point in time I had kind of made the mental switch in my head that I was going to continue to use those two. But if you were said, okay, you can only use one or the other, which would I use? At this point in time, I think I would probably lean on Codex. 2 reasons. Number one, it's very, very good. Okay, it has multiple modalities in terms of being able to access it, CLI, plugin, but the web-based access that you can do, or the cloud-based access you can do with Codex is really great, because you can go onto your phone if you wanted to, and you can type into Codex, the Codex interface, because it has access to all your code that you have stored in GitHub, right? And you can say, listen, hey, can you work on X, Y, Z, and let me know when you're done. And it'll go off and it'll do the work, and it'll give you a message back on the phone when it's ready. And then what you'll end up with, in terms of how Codex works, is you end up with a bunch of tasks. And I won't get into it now, but it's important that when you're working with Codex, and it gives you a bunch of tasks, it's important to understand you need to execute those tasks in a certain order. Eventually, those tasks turn into pull requests, okay? And then those pull requests, if you implement them, right, end up in GitHub sitting there waiting to be merged, right? So you have to go through these various steps. But it's really nice to be able to do that on your phone if you wanted to do it on your phone, if you're out and about, or if you're on the way into the office or something of this nature. So I love Codex. If you pressed me and said you can only use one, I would go with Codex. And again, it's cheap, $20 a month. And you will hit limits, but for $20 a month, it's you can't beat it. Let's see. In Blackstone, for example, if you wanted the model to complete a task while referring to file A and file B as context, which model makes so both of them will work just fine. So if you've worked with like the original Copilot and through GitHub, that was a bit so it was great, but you always had to, in essence, tell it what was the context, right? So you had to define, okay, this is the file I'm talking about, or look at these three files when I'm asking you about this problem, right? That is to a much lesser extent today with Claude and with Codex, meaning they practically have access to your entire code base. So you're no longer having to try to define this and that, right? So if you were trying to do something with those particular files, you'd want to call them out, okay? But the great thing is that you're no longer, and of course, a lot of that's happened because the context windows on these models have become huge, right? Now, both of these models do have a process built in of basically compacting that context. So you will run into that occasionally, right? Where you're working with it and it says you need to compact the context, and it'll compact the context and send that up instead. But they're working through those aspects because they know they're annoying, right? Both of these companies very rapidly. So it's a much more fluid experience for me today coding with these than it was, honestly, probably, what is this? This is September. I did a bunch of coding back in October and November of last year with the GitHub Copilot. And this is just a night and day experience. Okay. Any other questions? I really appreciate you guys sticking around and asking questions. Okay. So. Well, I'm sure both Anthropic and OpenAI will be thrilled with that. Yeah, like I said, you can't beat the cost on OpenAI. I'm not sure how they're doing it, and they probably are doing it to try to corner the market, right? Loss leader. But yeah, like I said, for Claude right now, I don't know if you were here earlier, but I am using Max, so I'm basically paying $100 a month for it, so that I don't have to worry about limits so much, as well as I don't have to worry about being nickel and dime for everything. And I'll keep using both for a while. And if Codex ends up being the clear winner, then maybe I'll just up my account for OpenAI or something and just continue using it. But I do like the second opinion. And earlier in this live, we kind of demonstrated that, where I had a review done with both, right? And Claude came back with something that I kind of knew wasn't right because I knew we'd already addressed it. So I just asked Codex to verify it, and it came back and said, no, what's being outlined here, right, has already been accomplished. We've already taken care of. So I like that. I always like a second opinion, to be honest. So. Okay, well, thanks, everybody. I really appreciate you hanging out, and have a good, what is this? This is Saturday. So if it's Saturday where you're at, enjoy. Take care. Bye-bye.